Hello and welcome to Restoring Our American Republic. I'm Chuck Benoit with The Nature of Things, where we are realigning God, government, and natural law so that we might restore our American Republic. Alexis de Tocqueville said, America is great because America is good, and if America ever ceases to be good, it will cease to be great. But he's also credited with noting the idea of American exceptionalism. He felt that there couldn't be another America. A nation having religious moorings is not out of the ordinary. Most nations have a particular perspective on God. What makes America's relationship with the Bible so different is that it differentiates between what the Bible says about eternal life and what it says about life here on this earth. I've made this distinction here a few times, discussing the idea that not everyone in our nation must accept Jesus Christ as their Savior. That would be all about eternal life. But everyone must submit to the biblical value system for peace and prosperity here on earth. Today, I want to kind of discuss American exceptionalism and why would this concept be so exceptional. When you put unnatural stress into a person's life, violating natural law, there can be no peace in that person's life. And when you do this nationally, there can be no peace in the life of that nation. Concepts like abortion, homosexuality, immigration without assimilation are violations of natural law, God's law. If a Christian hides behind the idea of compassion for acceptance of these unnatural values, they show a great ignorance of true biblical compassion. Biblical compassion would help these people out of the intellectual strongholds that keep them bound to unnatural behavior that produces stress in their lives and in stress in the life of our nation. And as we nurture these violations of nature, American exceptionalism wanes. Now, President Trump is planning to rededicate our nation to the God of our founding on our 250th anniversary. Let's all pray that rededication is joined by we the people. And let's make America exceptional again. With that, good morning, Mr. Levine.
Good morning, Chuck. That's very challenging. I'll try to live up to my American exceptionalism today.
There you go. There you go. A lot going on in the world. We've been pretty much talking about the state of Florida, but we're going to kind of venture out into the world today. Mike, we're going to talk a little bit about the war in Iran. And I guess the
Yeah.
first question we want to posit, in particular to you, Mike, is must the nation be an imminent threat to America before America addresses potential threats in the world? What say you, Mr. Levine?
Well, Chuck, I'm really reluctant, to get into the resignation of Joe Kent, of course, who's already done a Tucker Carlson interview. And if you're following this kind of stuff, if you follow Tucker Carlson or Laura Loomer, who are the antithesis on this, Laura Loomer attacking Tucker Carlson, calling him Tucker Carlson, uh, indicating that he is that he doesn't love America, right? And I did see a report, which I believe is true, that Tucker Carlson could be the only American who is allowed to own property in Qatar. And if that's true, which I believe it is, that really says a lot about Tucker Carlson's relationship with Qatar, right? And if you're following this stuff closely, you know that America has a military base in Qatar. Iran struck Qatar after we, went into Iran. They attacked a bunch of their neighbors over there, Qatar, some people call it. I don't know. I have a friend of mine who actually has a business in Qatar, and I think he says Qatar, and he's Lebanese, by the way. So, you know, Joe Kent, and if you know Joe Kent, he's got a 11 military deployments, special forces, lost his wife in the Iraq war, super patriot, went to work under Tulsi Gabbard as the chief anti-terrorism director, and then decided not too long into his term of office that the war well, if you want to call it a war, I don't think Donald Trump actually calls it a war, but let's call it a war. I think it's a war. The war in Iran is unjustified because, according to Joe Kent, Iran was not an imminent threat before we went and struck Iran. And of course, Joe Kent takes it another step further, as Tucker Carlson does, and says that the reason we're in Iran is because we've allowed Israel to take over our foreign policy, which I reject that idea. So the question becomes, according to all those who say a nation must be an imminent threat before military intervention is justified. So my question to those people is, do we sit back and watch our stated enemies? Iran is a stated enemy. They call for death to America all the time. Do we sit back and watch them develop the war strategies and resources to attack us and do nothing until they become an imminent threat, at which point disposing of the threat is much more costly to us, Chuck? So I'd like to talk about that. I'd like to talk about that a little bit before we move on to our next bullet point.
Sure. Well, it's interesting. I follow Kat from Cat's Meow. She's been on our show a time or two, and this morning, I guess it must have come in yesterday, but she has quite a lengthy Substack piece about Islam versus America from 1979 to the present, and she lists 26, if I counted them correctly, 26 attacks that Iran has made on our nation or on Americans or our bases from 1979 to the present, starting all the way back in President Ronald Reagan's day. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It looks like 7 different attacks under Reagan, and then under Clinton, another. I think a little bit more than that. George W. Bush, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 attacks. Obama, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 attacks, 6 attacks. And then President Trump, another few of them. Then Biden, Obama. A few more. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. Of all the attacks that we've had to deal with, and I don't believe any of these recent home attacks in Texas and one there. I guess you could kind of throw the New York City one in there, but these people have been at a war with us since 1979. So, what? How do they define an imminent threat? We've been attacked.
That's a great question. Well, yeah, we're being attacked. So basically, as Barack Obama tried to convince us that terrorist attacks in our countries is just something we have to learn to live with. And I totally reject that concept. And, now, maybe I'm sure we'll have plenty of chances today to talk about it, but I've never seen the American military so effective. And that's because we have unbridled the military and told them that we want them to win at, I don't want to use the word all costs, but, we want to do everything we can, bring all the forces that we have available to achieve victory. And I think this is the first president in my lifetime that's ever really given the military, taking the leash off the military and allowed them to win, Chuck.
That is an important point, Mike, because the main reason we are in all these forever wars is because we won't win. The idea is to maintain some sort of a, a warlike footing with the world, and that's peace through world threat or war or whatever. And what President Trump is trying to do is get peace through economic prosperity. You know, that is an incredibly different perspective on world peace. And there has to be a lot of people making a lot of money on this constant global conflict, and there has to be some sort of uh, stabilizing force between opposition, militarily opposite perspectives. We have to either be us versus Russia, us versus China, us versus Iran. We can't just basically say, let's set up the world such that we all can live together in economic prosperity. That's where President Trump is coming from, in my estimation.
I don't disagree with what you're saying. So I personally believe that we cannot allow our stated adversaries to um, enhance their ability to kill us without intervention until they become an imminent threat, in which case we know that more American blood and treasure will be lost in subverting the threat. So, and of course, a lot of it, it just goes into the whole diplomacy piece of it all. And, that whole conversation about how do you keep people who you have adversarial interests with at bay. And you have to leverage many resources, but in war, of course, killing them would be the worst case scenario, last step, right? In defense, I would suggest, of our nation. Um, and that, so I'm saying to you that I don't want to wait until these people have a knife at my throat before I begin protecting against the threat, Chuck.
Yeah, again, I've known this, but I'm giving Kat from Cat's Meow some credit because she also says this in her recent Substack that Muslims are required to either do violence, which is jihad, or lie, which I don't know if I can pronounce it, but taqiyya or something like that. They're required in their religion to lie and murder until they get their way. And that is an antithesis. That's totally antithetical to America, to exceptionalism, to American exceptionalism for sure. And that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with people whose religion demands that they lie until they get their way. So diplomacy, how do you exercise diplomacy with people like that?
There is, you know, a plethora of recorded statements from clerics all over the world stating that Islam will either convert you or kill you until every single household on the planet is Islam. If that's not antithetical to American values, I don't know what is.
How can it not be antithetical to global values, global values of peace?
Well, there's a lot of I guess Islam around the world. They're a very populous. They're a big percentage of the global population. So that's another component, right? And then you're saying to yourself, is anyone who is not Islamic allowed to live on this planet? And the answer, based on their doctrine, is no. So that's something that we have to identify in America, as far as I'm concerned, and we need to ban Sharia law in America, and we need to enforce laws that prevent Islam from breaking the law here in America. And we could go on and create a list of the things that are inherent in Islam that are illegal in the United States that we need to enforce. But I don't want to go down into that rabbit hole. I don't think it's productive, Chuck.
Sure. Well, what we're talking about again is, the constraints of freedom of religion. And yeah, I've expressed this whether on this show or not. Even religious freedom is subjected to natural law. And so if any religious type, any type of religion violates natural law, then it is an unconstitutional religious act or religion. In the case of Islam, it is clearly an unconstitutional religion. It's more of a governmental structure than it is a religion. It is uh, worse than oligarchy. It's you couldn't call it a monarchy. Maybe you could call it a monarchy, but it's
It's a
basically
theocracy.
theocracy. That's probably the right word. Yeah, I don't why it didn't come to mind. Um, so we, I think we've determined that uh, Iran was an imminent threat. Iran has attacked us at least 20 plus times. Um, so what are the risks associated with Operation Epic Fury? What are your thoughts on that, Mike?
Well, obviously, I think all the military community would say that if you think, that, you go in with plan A, plan B, plan C, and you plan for everything, and until you strike your enemy, then you have no idea what you'll be facing until the enemy responds to the strike. And I've been watching congressional testimony from the intelligence community over the last couple of days. I'm listening to, I'll tell you something, it's amazing today that we actually have access to congressional hearings where oversight committees are interviewing, not just oversight, but various different committees in Congress are interviewing our intelligence community leaders. Um, and the people who oppose what we're doing in Iran um, are trying to obviously set up Donald Trump for impeachment after the midterms, should we lose the midterms. So they're trying to extract statements out of our intelligence community that would be planks in their case against Trump if we lose the midterms, because they will indict Trump. I mean, they will attempt to impeach Trump if they take control of the House. So our intelligence community is really being put on the spot, and with very targeted questioning about the risk of going into Iran, such as, did the intelligence community brief President Trump that it would be likely that Iran would strike their neighbors if we strike them? And of course, I mean, it's impossible to believe that Trump was not briefed that that would be a likely response to the targeting in Iran. So I think that's just a military truth. Um, but the intelligence community has done a pretty good job not tying Trump to the expectation that Iran would strike its neighbors if we strike them. So the risk, the risk is number one that they would strike their neighbors for sure. But again, what's really amazing about that, Chuck, is that the people that have the most to lose are really the Europeans and, of course, the Chinese, because Europe and China gets a lot of their energy through the Strait of Hormuz, which historically is controlled by Iran. And today, no one controls the Strait of Hormuz. I was looking at, I was based on, just my monitoring of this issue. I learned that approximately 100 oil tankers go through the Strait of Hormuz on a typical day, and each one of those oil tankers carries 2 million barrels of oil. And it's Europe and China who are experiencing reductions in the oil supply right now, not because Iran shut the strait, because Iran doesn't have the ability to shut the strait right now, but because of economic and risk um, factors that are getting to the point where the operators of these massive ships are not willing to subject their crews and their assets to the possibility that Iran could have mined the strait, or that that there would be damage to their assets and death to their crews. So that is what has reduced the amount of traffic through the Strait of Hormuz to a couple of ships a day. And we can talk more about that. And then again, you got to get into this Karg Island conversation as well. And people who are not following this probably don't know what Karg Island is. I didn't know, but I am a geek on you know politics, so I follow this stuff pretty closely every day, and I learned a lot about it. So we can talk about Karg Island if you want, Chuck. But the risk is unmeasurable. But I will say to you that based on what we've seen so far, I think the military has done an amazing job. They have basically neutered Iran. Iran has very little capability of waging war. Okay, there are some small. I watched a press conference this morning from Secretary of War Pete Hegseth and the chief of the Joint Chief of Staff Chairman Daniel Raising Kane, and basically we have stripped Iran of their ability to wage war, accepting some local strikes, which of course, anytime there's a loss of life and destruction of assets, that's bad. But if you go back to the original question, was it a good idea? Was America, Donald Trump, justified in striking Iran? Then I would suggest that the military has delivered Iran on a silver platter to all of those who feel that the world would be better off without the theological, clerical regime running it. So I'm pretty happy with what I'm seeing right now, Chuck.
Yeah, I mean, I would, when you look at the risks associated with the war, uh, just on a completely different level or different area, the loss of Republican control of the House and Senate is also a risk there. Um, but let's move on because our
Very big
time is just
risk.
quickly running by. What are some benefits? What do you feel are some benefits of Operation Epic Fury when America's stated objectives are actually accomplished?
Man, I mean, to emerge out of this conflict with a pro-Western Iran is a game changer in every component of the world. Okay. I mean, we've talked about the energy, and that's a big piece of the puzzle because that is Iran's primary economic product. And our enemies rely on Iran and Venezuela, of course, for oil. And so, for example, I believe that our number one threat in the world is the Chinese Communist Party. And if America is basically overseeing the flow of oil out of Iran and out of Venezuela, that's really bad for the Chinese Communist Party. So that's the key benefit there, but not to mention the fact, Chuck, that without the threat of Iran, it really makes the entire Middle East a much more pro-business, pro-global engagement environment. So I believe that all of the Gulf states will be better off if peace is there, if peace and prosperity is their desire, then a pro-Western Iran will contribute greatly to peace and prosperity in the Middle East, greater than anything we've ever seen for sure, and possibly more than any of our past presidents have even imagined, Chuck.
Yeah, and also, Mike, what it does is um, uh, strike at the root of the war hawks that we have in our country, as well as those in Great Britain and Europe, who desperately seem to need war to make them happy. I think there's a lot of the banking systems that benefit from war, and again, going back to Promethean action, and you guys, those of you out here listening, you need to check in these ladies. They really do have a very interesting perspective on the global world system, and the reality is, with less war, there are a lot of people out there that are going to have less. Uh, less of the bottom line. They're not gonna do so
Less
well.
money, Chuck. The word is
Less money,
money.
yeah. Well, that's the point. There you go. So,
Very easy to
yeah,
define. It's
yeah,
money. They will
yeah.
have less money.
The difference between the major organizations of the world just getting more and more wealthy, or the average citizen of the world all of a sudden moving into a higher level of economic prosperity. Um, the
Well,
someone
what a
once
comment,
said
Chuck. Go
someone
ahead.
once said
Someone
that
once
there's
said what,
enough
Chuck?
that America has proven. It was actually President Donald J. Trump, an economic advisor, said that Donald Trump has proven that the American economic system, the American economic energy engine, could raise the lifestyle of every person on the face of the planet to what we would call a middle class income. And that's really what I think President Trump really wants to do. And the global powers that be don't really want that. And the whole idea of the world not being able to handle the population, so we need to reduce the population, whatever the 2030 thing where they want to reduce the population by a certain percentage by 2030. These people are the ones that are looking for constant global conflict, anything that would cause death and destruction, especially to thousands of people. So the population people are not unhappy when Iran murders 30,000 protesters in a week or two. That's really, moving toward their goals of reducing population by 2030. So that's my position on that. So in the few minutes we have left, Mike,
What I want to
will
say
Iran,
is,
I'm
go
sorry.
ahead. Well, what I want to say is that, Donald Trump has invited our allies to come and participate in opening the Strait of Hormuz, and none of them are interested in doing that. So, I mean, if you take a look at it and you get these people that are anti-Israel, and then you say, okay, well, let's take a look at this from a true alliance standpoint, that here we are in Iran. Europe is one of the biggest beneficiaries towards maintaining operations in the Strait of Hormuz, but NATO countries are not willing to send assets over to keep the strait open. And the only ally who really, well, that's not true, because some of the actual Gulf state countries are engaged in this war with us now, which is great. Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, some of the other countries in the Gulf are actually participating in the war with us now. But if you define your best ally by the person who is most willing and able to support military actions around the world when necessary, Israel is by far our greatest asset, because they have the willingness and ability to step in shoulder to shoulder with us and support this war. Others have been given the opportunity and refused. So who is our greatest ally, Chuck? I mean, am I wrong about that? Am I prejudiced in this argument? When other countries, our NATO partners, are unwilling to keep the Strait of Hormuz open, for their own benefit. But Israel is a competent, productive ally in this initiative. Who is our best ally? So let's reframe the conversation. What if this was in Europe? I don't think the NATO countries would send support in Europe. Look at Ukraine, right? I mean, NATO countries do very little in Ukraine, in my view. So they're not willing to step up in their own backyard. They do nothing in Iran. And yet people in America say that we should minimize our relationship with Israel. Well, that's not what I see it, for the reasons I just now stated, Chuck. Am I wrong here?
Yeah. Well, again, we're moving right toward the end of our time here. So I'm going to make one quick comment, and that is, people who make a lot of money with high oil prices are doing the best they can to make as much money as they can, because when the Strait of Hormuz is allowed to reopen, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and the free flow of oil continues to be that way for decades. Well, they're the ones that are going to lose on the dollar. Well, our last question, Mike, and you're gonna have to give me your final pitch here when you answer this question. Will Iran return to its historical roots as a pro-Western nation after this? What are your thoughts? And then close us out.
Okay. Well, if I believe that if you leave it to the people of Iran, the answer to the question, will Iran become a pro-Western nation after this military operation? I would say long term, which I would say a couple of years from now, the answer is yes. If the people of Iran get to choose their own destiny, which I believe they desperately want. So that's my answer, Chuck. I think, the only reason that would not happen is if this theological, clerical leadership, regains control of Iran. And I don't believe that President Trump is going to allow that to happen. Again, you can get into the conversation about boots on the ground and all that kind of stuff, but I don't believe we have to have boots on the ground. Again, we're flying helicopters over Iran right now. So we are moving into a phase of air supremacy over Iran, which means we can fly whatever we want over that country without risk, of harm. So I think that, based on this situation, and as long as America is willing to keep air, strikes up for an indefinite period, I believe that eventually Iran will fold. And I believe that the people of Iran will eventually take control of their country, and we will certainly have a much more pro-America, pro-West Iran. And I think that's good for the whole world, Chuck.
And I agree with that, Mike. And thank you so very much for your conversation today. And thank you all again for tuning into our twice weekly live stream. Please follow us on Facebook at Restoring Our American Republic, or check us out on YouTube at Restoring Our American Republic ROAR. Please like and share our program. And remember, if you're unwilling to govern yourself, you will be governed by tyrants. Until next time, God bless you. God bless President Donald J. Trump. And God bless America.